Nelson Mandela, the hero of the fight against apartheid. Nelson Mandela, known worldwide as a symbol of resistance and justice, was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvezo in the Eastern Cape region of South Africa. The son of a tribal chief, his name Rolala means pulling the branch of a tree or cause trouble, a hint of his transformative destiny. His extraordinary journey of leadership, imprisonment, and eventual release echoed across the globe and remains a testament to the power of perseverance, dignity, and forgiveness. He made a conscious effort to promote unity between Black and white South Africans and began negotiations with the government to peacefully end the apartheid regime. His conciliatory stance was crucial in avoiding civil conflict and ensuring a transition to a multiracial democracy. Mandela's determination to lead with integrity and focus on the greater good made him a beloved figure not only among Black South Africans, but also among whites, who feared that his liberation would mean the end of their privileges. He understood that the future of South Africa depended on the ability of all citizens, regardless. For the majority of the Black population, who represented the largest segment of the South African population, apartheid meant exclusion, poverty, and repression. The origins of a leader Mandela studied at the University of Fort Hare and later at the University of the Witwatersrand, where he was exposed to ideas of equality and human rights. His journey to becoming an activist began when he moved to Johannesburg, where he worked as a lawyer and became involved with the African National Congress ANC, which opposed apartheid. During this time, he met other important figures in the struggle for freedom, such as Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, who became essential allies in the cause. Mandela became involved with the ANC in the 1940s, initially seeking change through nonviolent civil disobedience. However, after the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, when the police killed 69 peaceful protesters against segregation, Mandela realized that the struggle for freedom required a new type of resistance. He began to support the idea that violence could not be dismissed in the face of the regime's brutality. It was in this context that he became one of the founders of the ANC's military wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe of the Nation, which sought to combat apartheid more actively. Imprisonment and the 27 years of struggle in 1962, Mandela was arrested for his involvement in anti-apartheid activities. In 1964, during the Rivonia trial, he and other ANC leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment. The sentence was an attempt by the South African regime to silence the growing resistance to its oppression, but instead, it catapulted Mandela into the position of martyr and global symbol of the fight against injustice. The 27 years of imprisonment that Mandela endured, including time at the famous Robben Island prison, became the center of his transformation, not only as a political leader, but also as an icon of peaceful resistance. Mandela's imprisonment was marked by harsh conditions. He and his fellow prisoners were forced to perform hard labor, such as breaking rocks in the scorching heat of Robben Island, and were often deprived of contact with the outside world. But Mandela's moral strength remained unshaken. During the first years of his imprisonment, he rejected all offers of release that required him to renounce his struggle and accept the terms of apartheid. During his time on Robben Island, Mandela came to understand the importance of reconciliation and national unity. He had to endure the pain of isolation, but at the same time used his imprisonment to strengthen himself, study, and plan for the future of the struggle. In secret letters, he continued to instruct his comrades not to give up, keeping the flame of hope alive for the oppressed. Liberation and the path to reconciliation. The global impact of Mandela's imprisonment grew over time. International protests and boycott campaigns put pressure on the apartheid regime, and apartheid began to be challenged on multiple fronts. In 1990, after a period of intense internal and external pressures, South African President F.W. de Klerk decided to release Mandela, acknowledging that the continuation of apartheid was no longer sustainable. On February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela was released after 27 years of incarceration. His release was a historic milestone, but contrary to what many expected, Mandela did not use his freedom to seek revenge or revolt. Instead, he chose a path of reconciliation and forgiveness. He made a conscious effort to promote unity between Black and white South Africans and began negotiations with the government to peacefully end the apartheid regime. His conciliatory stance was crucial in avoiding civil conflict and ensuring a transition to a multiracial democracy. Mandela's determination to lead with integrity and focus on the greater good made him a beloved figure not only among black South Africans, but also among whites, who feared that his liberation would mean the end of their privileges. He understood that the future of South Africa depended on the ability of all citizens, regardless. Mandela's Island, a symbol of resistance, hope, and liberation. Robben Island, located approximately 12 kilometers off the coast of Cape Town, South Africa, is a place steeped in history and deep meaning. For centuries, the island was used for various purposes, including as a quarantine and prison site. But it was during the Apartheid regime that it became a symbol of resistance and the fight for freedom. Communication with the outside world was limited. Letters and visits were rare, and contact with his children was sporadic. However, despite this isolation, Mandela never lost hope. He believed his fight was not only for personal freedom, but for a better future for the next generations. He knew that his imprisonment was not the end of his struggle, but rather a stage in the journey toward victory. Robben Island as a symbol of global resistance. While Mandela was physically confined, his figure became increasingly important to the fight against apartheid. He believed that his struggle should not be negotiated, and that his dignity should not be sacrificed for his personal liberty. The harsh conditions of confinement, however, were designed to break his will and weaken his spirit. The oppression, psychological violence, and constant attempts at isolation, however, could not deter Mandela's inner strength. He became not only a political leader, but also a symbol of peaceful resistance. Between 1961 and 1991, Robben Island became the prison for a number of activists and leaders opposing apartheid. The apartheid regime sought to silence and suppress any form of resistance to racial segregation and the oppression of black and other non-white groups in South Africa. Nelson Mandela, one of the leading figures of the African National Congress (ANC), was arrested in 1962 and sent to Robben Island, where he spent 18 years. During this period, the island transformed from a mere place of confinement to a symbol of resistance and a metaphor for the struggle for freedom. Mandela's life on Robben Island. When Mandela arrived at Robben Island in 1964, he was assigned to a tiny and extremely poor cell, measuring just 0.4 meters by 0.1 meters, with no furniture and only a small iron window through which he could barely see the outside. He was forced to work in the island's quarries under the blistering sun, a physically exhausting and often unbearable task. During the first years of his imprisonment, prisoners were treated with extreme cruelty, allowed only one visit a year and one letter every 6 months. The food was scarce, and their interactions with guards were often abusive. However, despite these inhumane conditions, Mandela never lost his courage or determination. Mandela and his fellow prisoners, including Walter Sisulu, Ahmed Kathrada, and other ANC members, found ways to resist, even in the harshest circumstances. During the day, they were forced to do physical labor in the quarries, but in their free time, they secretly organized. On occasion, they exchanged political ideas and discussed strategies for the future of South Africa. They also created an internal education system, with Mandela mentoring other prisoners on legal and political matters. His impromptu classroom and leadership became central to the silent resistance against the oppressive regime. The psychological and hopeful struggle despite the extreme conditions of life. Mandela never succumbed to despair. His mind and vision were always focused on a greater goal, freedom and equality for all South Africans. During his early years on Robben Island, he rejected all offers of freedom that would require him to renounce his cause. The psychological and hopeful struggle despite the extreme conditions of life. Mandela never succumbed to despair. His mind and vision were always focused on a greater goal, freedom and equality for all South Africans. During his early years on Robben Island, he rejected all offers of freedom that would require him to renounce his cause. His determination to remain steadfast in the face of adversity inspired his fellow prisoners and further strengthened his belief that the apartheid regime would eventually fall. The greatest challenge for Mandela and his fellow prisoners on Robben Island was not only the physical pain, but the psychological toll of being separated from family and society. Communication with the outside world was limited. Letters and visits were rare, and contact with his children was sporadic. However, despite this isolation, Mandela never lost hope. He believed his fight was not only for personal freedom, but for a better future for the next generations. He knew that his imprisonment was not the end of his struggle, but rather a stage in the journey toward victory. Robben Island is a symbol of global resistance. While Mandela was physically confined, his figure became increasingly important to the fight against apartheid.